It's always kind of bothered me that I have this sort of professional microphone setup, but that I never used it for deck profiles because I simply was recording with my cell phone. But with my new computer setup, I'm pretty sure I have a way to use the microphone on the actual computer, well, the microphone that's hooked into the computer, with the visuals from my phone camera. Because my phone camera is good looking, it's just the microphone quality isn't quite as good as the one that I use to record normal videos. So we're going to try that out for this video, see how it goes. Hopefully you guys notice a difference. But anyway, today we're going to talk about blue eyes. This is kind of scary to do from my perspective, just because a lot of people I think, have eyes on me in terms of how I play this deck, because I've sort of made fun of a whole bunch of different variants. I think that Blue Eyes is a fun deck. I do not think Blue Eyes is a competitive deck, but I also believe that that's completely fine. I don't think Blue Eyes is really designed to be a competitive deck anymore, and that's okay. I mean, it makes big monsters, it makes big plays, it's just not that consistent, and I don't think you can really get it to be that consistent. However, I've played a lot of builds over the past couple weeks on live streams, everything from Chaos Max to Invoked to just sort of a pure Blue Eyes deck, to even really some pure Blue Eyes decks that are like so pure I didn't even think they were possible, like no hand traps, no anything, just Blue Eyes cards. And this one I think is the one that I've had the most success with. The basic strategy is just go first, summon 2 level 8 monsters, and win the game. So let's get into it. So first of all, we do have 3 copies of alternative Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now this card is sort of the staple Blue Eyes card. I think everyone already plays this card at 3, so I don't need to talk about that too much. I have 3 copies of the normal Blue Eyes White Dragon. I happen to play the LOB artwork. I do think this one is the best one. Some people disagree. I think that the movie one is pretty cool too. That's the one that you see in the background here that I have the mat of. But I think overall the LOB one just looks really sweet. 2 copies of Dragon Spirit of White. This card, I go back and forth on it. It's a card that you really want 1 copy of in the deck at almost every single point, so I can see why you'd want to play 2 just to make sure you have that one in the deck, but it is a pretty bad draw. Luckily, we do have trade-in to discard it if we do happen to draw, but it's really not something you ever want to see in your hand. However, we are playing some Pot of Desires, so we might banish 1, so I'm fine playing 2 copies. We are also playing 3 copies of Sage. This card is by far one of the best monsters in the entire deck. It really does everything you want out of a card. Not only can it search level 1s that you can then discard with Melody or with cards of Consonance, it's also a free level 8 monster, and our main strategy is just summoning 2 level 8 monsters going first, so this card can definitely help out with that, because you can discard it from your hand to special Blue Eyes from deck. We are also playing 3 copies of the regular White Stone, or I guess this one isn't the regular White Stone. This is White Stone of Ancients, I guess the other one. They're both called White Stone. Anyway, we're playing 3 copies of the good one. Not much explaining to do there. It's one of the best cards, and it's really what you want to send with number 95 when you do your big combo. We are playing 1 copy of White Stone of Legend, so this is the other White Stone, just sort of the original one. It's not the greatest card, but it is a good thing to discard the card's Consonance or Melody, and it's also pretty good to send to the graveyard. We are playing 1 copy of Master with Eyes of Blue. This is the only non-holographic card in the entire deck, sadly. I don't think this card comes in holographic. I'm pretty sure I would have looked out for that. But anyway, this card at 1 of, it's fine. It's really good to send with another engine we're playing that not everyone likes, but it's a good card to send to the graveyard. It's also a really good normal summon to add back your level 1 guys, so I like it. The engine that people aren't a fan of, I am playing both the Brilliant Fusion engine and the Morphage Goliath and Archbrave Dragon engine. Okay, so this is sort of something that I think most competitive players realize is like the best way to play this deck. However, I know that a lot of casual players and even sort of just budget players don't like this engine for a couple reasons. So, the Brilliant Fusion engine, why do I think it's good? Well, this whole deck is around not only summoning level 8 monsters, but it's sending light monsters to the graveyard, and Brilliant Fusion does that. Now, the second normal summon effect isn't the greatest thing in the world in this deck because we don't have a ton of normal summons, but getting that light monster in the graveyard is super valuable, and also you can combo this card by using the Master. Hold on, so the Master is something you can send with a Brilliant Fusion, and then you can instantly take this Seraphonite off the board to special summon a Blue Eyes from your graveyard. That's a pretty sick play. Gets a level 8 monster on board, gets a level 8 monster on board, and the whole reason I'm trying to get level 8 monsters on board is because of these 2 cards. So, many of you already know this combo. Basically, you're trying to summon number 95 and send both of these things to the graveyard, and then on your opponent's turn, you special summon a Morphage Goliath. It locks both players out of the extra deck, and usually you can just win right there. And that's the whole point of the deck, is to get that combo going. I think most of the time it gets off. Really, the whole deck is just like, how can we get level 8 monster on board just because of this combo? It's just so good. I know they suck to draw. I understand that. Not everyone likes playing Garnets in a deck that's already just inherently inconsistent, but I really do think that this is the best way to play the deck, just so you can actually have a chance of beating the top decks. I think this is the only way to play Blue Eyes if you actually want to beat the top decks with any win percentage, just because locking your opponent out of the extra deck is pretty darn good. Anyway, now that we got the point that now that we got rid of the cards that everyone hates to see, we can go into more cards that people are sort of on the fence about. 2 Ash Blossom, 1 Max C. Most people know that Max C is good, but Ash Blossom I still feel is great in this deck. I'm not playing 3 copies because if you're going first, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards and doing a lot of deck thinning, so you'll most likely see 1 copy of Ash Blossom. But when you're going second, you absolutely want to side 3 copies just to make sure you open it. It's so good going second to stop your opponent from just making like a bunch of ridiculous plays. But I do feel like you have to play Ash Blossom. Maybe if you're just playing at locals or something, you don't. But if you're trying to play this deck in any sort of competitive fashion, much like every other deck in the format, you pretty much have to have a set of Ash Blossoms. Although here we're only playing the 2 copies in the main deck. And that is actually it for all the monsters. I think that that's a pretty solid monster lineup. The only thing that I really thought about cutting was the second Spirit. It's one of those cards that, like, it's just so bad to draw. I think that's, like, the worst card to draw. I know the Amorphage is not very good to draw, and I realize Arcbrave isn't that good to draw, but I think that the Spirit is, like, my least favorite thing to see. Anyway, on to the spells. So we have a lot of 3-ofs. We have 3 Melody. Melody is like the main searcher card, also the best thing to discard like anything in your hand. It's not that bad drawing the Arcbrave and the Goliath because this is one of the cards that can get rid of them. Goliath is also level 8, so you can discard it with the Trade-In, but Trade-In's obviously just a good card in general because of all the Blue Eyes cards, and really one of the main things you're trying to do is like summon an alternative and then trade in the Blue Eyes out of your hand, hopefully trading that Blue Eyes in for better cards that can actually do something or advance your game state. One of those cards that advances your game state is Brilliant Fusion. We are using the beautiful Ultimate Rare copies, pretty cool looking, but yeah, 3 Brilliant Fusion, that's what you play. I think this card overall is just so good in this deck. I mean, yeah, there's some games where you draw Lazuli, but even if you cut all of the bricks in this deck, you still have to play 3 level 8 normal monsters in Blue Eyes and 2 or 1 Spirit. Those are kind of bricky. Sometimes the stones themselves can be bricky. There's so many parts of this deck that are already inconsistent that I just want to go big instead of going home, and I think that's what you do with Brilliant Fusion in this deck, at least, and I think it's good. Actually, in all my testing and the hours that we played the live streams, this was one of the best cards in the deck. 3 copies of Return. This card is really important to have when you do your going first combo with number 95 because it protects the Amorphage Goliath from being blown up by Spiral Tough. It's pretty important for that, so if you can get to this card, definitely try to get it into the graveyard ASAP so that your setup actually remains. It also helps that anytime that you have this card, you can pretty much get a free level 8 monster on board, which actually gets you to the number 95. More draw stuff. We have 2 Potted Desires. Yes, we already have some bricks in the deck, and this card has the potential to banish something like Lazuli, but the idea is this is the last, and this is sort of just the idea with Potted Desires in general, you use it after you've sort of used every other card in your hand to get a free 2 draws. So it's not like you were going to see those cards anyway because you had no other plays in your hand. You're not like drawing a hand of Potted Desires, Trade-In, Melody, and then just using Potted Desires right away. No, you save it until after you do the Melody, after you use the Trade-In, and then the last card you play is Potted Desires to hopefully dig you towards some hand traps or maybe some of your sackier one-ofs. Now, speaking of one-ofs, we have 1 copy of Cards of Consonance to round out all of the draw spells. We have 1 Silver's Cry. I know this card isn't something everyone plays, but I think it's really good for the OTKs. There are some pretty cool things that you can do where you sort of attack with like Spirit, tribute it, summon a Blue Eyes, Silver's Cry to do some more damage. I think it's pretty neat. 1 Dragon Shrine, another card that not everyone plays. I think it's really good though. Some of the worst hands in this deck are the ones where like you have to discard an alternative with a trade-in. So then you can Dragon Shrine to send the White Stone of Ancients and then add it back to your hand. It's a pretty good play. And then 1 Soul Charge. If you draw this card, you probably should win. Especially with the Brilliant Fusion engine in this deck. Brilliant Fusion Soul Charge is just like absolutely insane. So yeah, that is it though. So it's a 40 card deck, not anymore, obviously not any less. I think it's pretty consistent. Blue Eyes in general, I mean, I've made a lot of videos about this. It's not the most consistent deck in the world, but I think that if you really make it really explosive with all these cards, it actually has a potential to win a couple games. Now on to the extra deck. There's a couple slots in here you can probably switch out if you want to, but I'll kind of talk about them as we go along. One card you absolutely have to play two of, Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. It's by far the thing that you're going to go into most often. Not only for its like tributing effect, but also just because the graveyard negation effect is good, and the anti-pendulum effect is really good right now, like really good. This card is like almost a one card win condition against pendulums. They're sort of forced to skip their turn so they can make like an Ignister to out it, but outside of that though, they have a really tough time dealing with this card. We also have one Azurize. That's kind of like what you go in. Don't chain the Spirit Dragon to Regeki and summon Azurize, though, because this will start a new chain after the Regeki resolves, but by that time it's already in the graveyard, so it doesn't work. The Moonlight Dragon, pretty standard. Make sure that you remember that this card only hits special summoned monsters. It does not hit just any monster in general. One Michael for banishing stuff, one Ancient Fairy Dragon. The combo with this guy is that when you make Spirit Dragon on your turn, you can summon Ancient Fairy Dragon to special summon like an egg from your hand, and then make a level 8 Synchro monster. That's a pretty good play. The most common level 8 Synchro that you're making is Crystal Wing, but I also have one copy of Omega. I get it, not everyone likes Omega. At one point I was playing Cypher Gear Gamma in this deck as well, although I think you have to cut some cards to make that truly viable. But Omega's good. Omega's good for recycling the banished Ancients, and it's also good for recycling the Return of the Dragon Lords spell card, and you can keep protecting your monsters. So it's a good card. Crystal Wing is really impactful, but sometimes Omega is just so powerful. So that's it for the Synchro monsters. Moving on to the Exceed monsters, we have one copy of the Hope Harbinger. This is sort of like what you make when you don't make your other rank 8 play. So the other rank play, and the one that you sort of all are probably aware of, is using the Tachyon, or another, I think Prime Photon Dragon is also one you can use. Basically, you go into this guy, pop on its opponent's card if it's during their turn, if it's your turn, it doesn't really matter, and then you summon the Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon. So this card is incredible. Basically, you summon it and you send to the graveyard. This is like the combo, if no one knows, I guess. So you summon it and then send the Amorphage Goliath, the Archbrave, and one of the eggs to the graveyard, most likely White Stone of Ancients. So at that point, you then get this card's end phase effect, or you can get the add back effect right there if you want. But then on your opponent's turn, Archbrave activates, special summon Amorphage Goliath. So when your opponent's turn starts, you'll have this set up with a number 95 in your extra zone, and then an Amorphage Goliath. So you have a 2750 guy and a 4000 attack guy, and your opponent can't special summon from the extra deck. Well, you can't either, but you already have the dude, so it doesn't really matter. And that's basically the win condition. That's what the whole deck is designed to do. And honestly, it does that play pretty consistently with the way that we have it built. But these are the only Exceed monsters you're really either making this combo, or if you don't need that combo, or if you drew like the Archbrave and you couldn't discard it, you just make Hope Harbinger, which is still a good card, still a solid card. Lastly, we have one fusion monster, the Gem Knight Seraphonite. All of you are probably pretty familiar with this card by now, but it is obviously needed for the Brilliant Fusion. And then the Link monsters are just Proxy Dragon and Decode Talker. To be completely honest, you will almost never make these. The only times you really make these guys are when you have Soul Charge. Sometimes when you have Brilliant Fusion, you make it. But like I said, with Brilliant Fusion, you just send the Master, and then it gets rid of the Seraphonite on board. So then it puts a Blue Eyes on the board instead. So sort of Brilliant Fusion is like a Monastery Born for Blue Eyes. There's a little more to it, because you can like add a Blue Eyes to your hand by sending like the Blue Eyes and the Lazuli. Lazuli adds back to the hand. You can send like the Stone of Ancients to like add back an alternative. It's just like a really all-encompassing good card, and that's why I like it. But anyway, that is going to wrap up my Blue Eyes deck profile. You can cut some of the more explosive cards. I think in the long run, though, that's not the right decision. If you cut like... So like maybe Brilliant Fusion's like fine to cut if you don't like that card. But if you're cutting these cards, you really don't have a win condition. It's kind of funny because, I mean, not that those are like the most important cards, but like when you cut those cards, the deck just doesn't have any way of like killing your opponent. So basically at that point, all you're doing is summoning the Spirit Dragon and just hoping it gets there. Maybe a Harbinger next to it, but that's kind of tricky now that we have the Link monsters, or the extra zones or whatever. So really, when you don't play these cards to sort of floodgate your opponent out of the game, your only win condition is Spirit Dragon. I don't think that's good enough. So I really recommend playing these cards. If your opponents are super casual and don't use the extra deck that much, they're not that good. But in almost every single modern sense of this deck, I think you have to play them. But anyway, that's my deck profile. I know a lot of you have been waiting for it. Let me know what you think about the new mic setup, if it was too quiet or too loud or something. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.